Okay, so this video is going to be is addressed to fellow people in the mold avoidance world community, and very much preaching to people who already understand that this phenomenon is real and understand some of Eric's theories and the idea that it's not just, just a random overreaction to normal molds, but that it's based on environmental toxicity. But that despite that, may not think it's worth engaging in addressing the big picture and changing in a really drastic way this environmental catastrophe that we are some of the first ones to be affected by. Apologize for the brain fog. So I have had discussions with a lot of people, some of them experienced avoiders, in which people have expressed various arguments against engaging in any kind of actions to get more research into this phenomenon from scientists, and to get more funding for research, and to get more recognition. And I could summarize a few of the arguments. One of them is, well, scientists are almost the enemy. They've spent so long screwing us over, ignoring these clues. I just don't trust them. I'm happy to be doing something for my own health, which is all in my own hands and doesn't involve appealing to outside entities. That's one. Another is, I have to, this is already a hard life, even if you are pretty high on the power curve, and I have to take care of my family first and me first, because the big picture stuff can be left to other people who are more idealistic, but because this is so hard, I just need to focus on protecting me and us and those close to me, which I think is really valid and normal human thing to feel. But I want to argue to that second point that things are getting exponentially worse toxicity wise, and I'm not basing this on me as an inexperienced mold avoider, although I think my experience in my other videos about how severe things can get from mold, how that can melt your ligaments essentially, throws light on how bad shit is. But I'm basing this on reports, like on obsessively reading the backlog of all these groups, on reports from experienced mold avoiders, and on huge volumes of anecdote about people getting sicker and sicker, and more people getting sicker and sicker, and on a lot of what Eric Johnson says, and also, as I've summarized in my other videos, I've found that the scientific literature, although Eric's theories haven't gotten enough research, the scientific literature, some of it really does support that despite the overwhelming lack of interest from researchers, there's still evidence there. But, so, sorry, where was I? So things are getting worse, and they're not just getting slowly worse, they're getting exponentially worse, and we have many reasons to believe this. And I guess I shouldn't really go through those reasons. I could do a separate video on that. I think a lot of people already know this. I mean, we have reports of just places that in the past 3 years, 4, 5, 6 years have gotten a lot worse, like that were really remote wilderness areas going bad. City of Rocks recently, and the North Rim of the Grand Canyon recently, Moab area, and a lot of them reports from fairly experienced avoiders. Joshua Tree is another example, Pagosa Springs, and there are probably many more examples, but we rarely hear of reports of places getting better. I mean, the biome might have the capacity to heal itself if we weren't doing devastating damage to it on a daily basis and on a really large scale. So I don't think we have reason to be optimistic that there will be many good places left in, say, 10 years. I'd be willing to take the bet that in 10 years there will be very few pristine places left. And the reason that matters is because I think that even very experienced mold avoiders have skin in the game here, have a stake in this. Even if you want to protect yourself and your family first, I think that in a long enough time scale, and I'm saying that time scale might not be very long, you might be in the same boat as us inexperienced mold avoiders, in that these pristine locations are going to disappear, and we're going to be kind of like hunted animals that are, have to move constantly to the last few pristine places because we're like endangered species whose habitat is disappearing. And I think, like I said, I think that applies even to very experienced avoiders. And that's why I think, even just out of self-interest, which is a really fine thing as a motivation, out of self-interest, I feel like it's in all of our best interests to address this and keep having pristine places. And, just anecdotally, 100 years ago, people could heal just by moving to the west or the southwest. 30 to 40 years ago, when the Tahoe outbreak and other outbreaks were happening, it wasn't quite that easy, but a lot of people healed just by moving to a house in some remote desert, even severely ill people. But that's when Eric started to notice things getting a lot worse, toxic mold entering the popular lexicon, and many more cases of mold illness. And what he said was, when he was chosen as a prototype for the CFS syndrome, he said, "I chose to inaugurate the syndrome by saying that I had an inexorably increasing reactivity to mold that grows progressively worse no matter where I live or how well I try to take care of myself. And if whatever happened to me goes on as it did in Incline Village, there will be millions of people like me." I think we're seeing that already, and I don't think we have a lot of time to change this. Okay, and another argument I've heard, against doing activism or getting researchers invested or dealing with all this on a large scale is that it's hopeless, and that the past evidence shows that they will not listen no matter what. I think that whether or not it is close to hopeless, it's not literally impossible, and if there's a ghost of a chance, it's kind of like a do or die thing. I think it doesn't matter if there's a 0.01% chance, that chance has to be seized. smallest of a chance. We absolutely have to win this, because I think on a long enough time scale, which in my mind might be about 10 years, there will be very few pristine places left, and will be like hunted animals. And I think that based on, reports from recent places, based on what Eric has said, and based on other markers of environmental toxicity. And I think that means, for better or worse, we're all in this together, the novices and the experienced mold avoiders. I don't think that we're necessarily, any of us are going to make it through this if the toxicity reaches a certain point. I think we'll be like hunted animals, or like animals whose habitat are destroyed, fleeing for what's left, like small spaces of relief. And so I think that we all have to work together to do something about this, no matter how hopeless it seems. Another thing is that I think this is, people talk about doing Eric-style avoidance in the practical sense, but Eric has always stated that he didn't want to get everyone to live in a tent in the desert, and that while he did do what he did to save his life, he also did it to get researcher interest into a disturbing phenomenon. And so I think every time we talk about Eric-style avoidance, we should talk about that aspect of it too, the addressing the big picture, the addressing this injustice, and getting research into this. And I know that Lisa Peterson has said similar things, in that she didn't think mold avoidance is going to be feasible for everyone. It's a Hail Mary pass that will help those who have the resources to do it and are sick enough to consider it. But that the main purpose of her gathering all this information is to get researcher interest. So I think we should all think about that when we talk about Eric-style avoidance.